It's great to be here with you today. I was just thinking about the last time I was invited to speak at this event. I think it was at the Oval about 18 months ago on a fabulous sunny morning. What a difference it was to be sitting in a cupboard off my bedroom talking to you today. Um, but I guess maybe as a starting point, I suppose the key facet of Scottish Mortgage to understand is that we are very long-term growth investors. But isn't technology changing so fast that it's hard to be very long-term when you think about growth? Well, if you could flick to the next but one slide, Oliver. So yeah, one back. That's the one. What I want to argue this morning is that change can actually be quite predictable, but investors make the mistake of spending a lot of their time trying to predict things which are impossible. What will the level of the stock market be at the end of next year? I don't know. What will economic growth be next year? Don't know. Interest rates, same. 2020 is really a great example of that. If you'd given me perfect foresight into the events of this year, would I have accurately predicted stock prices? No. And the example I've used, the picture for you, is oil prices. So the dark purple path shows the oil price over time through to 2015. All the other lines are the World Energy Organization's forecasts at that point in time. And you can see the path of that purple line is completely unrelated to those forecasts. Using these types of data point to drive your investment strategy is challenging. And there are lots of smart and extremely well-paid people trying to predict these variables already. So we don't waste our energy. Should we give up? Next slide, please. I would say no. There are changes going on that are much more important than fluctuations in interest rates or economic growth. And it's those that determine the opportunity for companies. So the example I've used here in this picture is the cost of generating energy from solar panels. It's declined at 20% per annum for the past decade, following an almost perfect exponential decline. I couldn't find a chart for the cost of storing energies in batteries, but it follows a very similar curve. So the price per kilowatt hour of storage has fallen about 16% for every doubling in global battery capacity. And I could add in Moore's law and semiconductors. I think Ben Rogoff did a slide showing that, or the bandwidth of communication networks. And none of these trajectories rely on predictions of technological breakthroughs. This is the application of scaling capital along with incremental innovation in existing industries. And that really is great news for investors. These are predictable long-run trends. And it just leads to the question, what does the world look like if computers are 50 times faster, if energy is, for most intents and purposes, free, if energy storage is ubiquitous? Next slide, please. So my topic for today is transport, but I think the combination of these improvements in hardware along with advanced software is transforming a number of existing industries. We've seen in retail with the growth of Amazon, as our previous speaker talked about. We can see it in the media industry, where Google and Facebook have come to dominate the advertising industry. But we're now seeing it in lots of other places, from health to education. So any one of those could have been my topic for today. But let's drill in on transport. I'm going to talk about some trends we've observed in our holdings. But the key point is to say that this isn't based on imagination. It's not some theoretical far-off future. It's based on companies which we're currently invested in. We have a 10-year investment horizon, and we expect these things to happen in that time frame. So next slide, please. So I'll start on passenger vehicles. Tesla has been the largest holding in Scottish Mortgage for a while now. I think it's high profile enough for me not to have to dwell on. NIO is a Chinese electric car company which has also been successful in scaling production into what we think will be one of the key markets for electric vehicles in the future, China. And I think there are three trends that are going to define the future of the passenger car. The first is electrification. And the argument here is pretty simple. Electric cars are better than combustion engine cars. They are faster. They are safer for their occupants. They are safer for pedestrians. They don't lead to local air pollution in the way that gasoline cars do. So this isn't dependent on people with an environmental agenda buying the products. It is simply that they are better, and that government legislation is going to force the issue anyway. So electrification will happen. The second important trend is towards autonomy. And what you need to understand about autonomy is that actually it's really quite easy to get a car to drive itself autonomously. Carnegie Mellon won the DARPA Prize in 2007 with an algorithm that could drive a car 97% of the time. What's really hard is that last few percent of accuracy. With billions of miles driven each year, you can't get it wrong 3% of the time. You can't get it wrong 0.1% of the time. You need to be 99.999% accurate. For society to accept this, it needs to be an order of magnitude better than the human driver. And we're getting there. Huge progress has been made. It's just that we can't perceive the difference between something that's 4 decimal places or 5 decimal places of accuracy. We're getting there. And the final trend in passenger vehicles is ownership. In a world of electric autonomous vehicles, we may still have private cars, but at that point they become income-producing assets if we want. We only use our cars 3 to 4% of the time, so owning them will become an unnecessary luxury. Indeed, ownership may well move to the lowest cost of capital. If you want concrete evidence of that, there's a very timely announcement overnight that one of our autonomous driving companies, Aurora, which is run by the professor from Carnegie Mellon who won that DARPA autonomous driving challenge back in 2007, that he bought Uber's advanced technologies unit and signed a strategic agreement to provide artificially intelligent drivers to Uber in the future. So next slide, please. Whilst passenger cars grab the headlines, there are interesting things going on in commercial vehicles. So I've pulled out 3 key trends. The first is software. When we think about transport, we think about hardware. And that mattered when your vehicle had 2,000 moving parts. Engineering mattered. But in the future, it's less relevant. Actually, software is much more important. We've touched on the autonomy. The bottom left picture here shows one of the vehicles being developed by a holding in the delivery company Nuro. These robots are electric. They replace human drivers in doing deliveries within neighborhoods. They're small, light, and that makes the challenge of autonomy less taxing than it is for passenger cars traveling at high speed with human occupants. Human drivers are a significant component of the cost for last mile delivery, so these vehicles could shepherd in a new era of fast, cheap, convenient delivery. And they recently raised $500 million to turn that into reality. The energy density point enables what I show in the top right, which is one of Zipline's delivery drones. These fixed-wing aircraft have a delivery range of about 100 kilometers. They drop their delivery by parachute to a 4-meter square drop zone. And the first applications have been for this technology have been in blood delivery in sub-Saharan Africa. That company now operates at national scale infrastructure. It controls about half of the blood supply in places like Rwanda and Ghana. This is happening today. And it's made possible by the declining cost of batteries, the declining weight of batteries, the use of software to do all of the flight controls, navigation, integration with air traffic control. And what started in the medical sector and in sub-Saharan Africa will begin rolling out with Walmart in the US next year. So this technology is coming to the skies near you soon. And the final point is that networks might be more important than individual vehicles. On the bottom right-hand side is a picture of Convoy's trucking app. There's a huge inefficiency in matching freight loads to vehicles in the trucking industry. It's still predominantly an industry that's based around brokers ringing hauliers with orders. But there was a huge change 5 years ago, because the growth in the penetration of smartphones suddenly meant that drivers had a device in their cabs which could relay all sorts of data about their location, their speed, their availability. And what Convoy is doing is using machine learning to drive efficiencies into that road haulage market. Instead of sending loads one by one, the software can batch them together. It can route trucks more efficiently to match the freight that's available. And there are just some massive savings to be gained from doing that. So that's what's changing in commercial vehicles. The final place I want to go was to the air. So last slide on this. So flying cars were once the stuff of imagination, science fiction, but the declining cost and weight of batteries, smart software, cheaper, lighter electric components takes you to the two aircraft shown on the bottom half of that slide. These are vertical takeoff and landing electric vehicles produced by Joby and Lilium, both of which we own. And we think these services are going to be very attractive. People were afraid of helicopters because they're noisy, because they have very fast-moving components just above your head. But these vehicles are quiet enough to use regularly in cities. Some of them have no exposed moving parts. They have several engines, so they aren't vulnerable to individual failures. And these are going through certification processes today with the Federal Aviation Authority. So there isn't a radical new set of inventions required. The predictable cost curves I talked about earlier take them right into the domain of affordable commuter services, and with a far better customer experience than most currently would enjoy. The final area of trial I want to touch on is space rockets. Now that was the preserve of governments for the past few decades, but that's changed. We own two space rocket companies, SpaceX and Relativity. And the crucial thing to understand here is it's all about cost. Space hasn't existed as a commercial market because it's too expensive. And the first thing that's changed is software. So many of you will have seen SpaceX's rocket boosters returning to Earth and landing after launching a rocket. That's a capability enabled by advanced software flight controls. It reduced the cost of launching by an order of magnitude. Just imagine the cost of plane travel if you had to scrap the aircraft at the end of every journey you made. Now, the second cost reduction is around manufacturing. And this is the interesting thing about Relativity Space. It doesn't have a factory like you might see for Boeing and Airbus with humans bolting hundreds of components together. Instead, it prints them in a three-dimensional printer. And constructing a space rocket in this way may represent a very significant step down in the cost of manufacturing for an item which has very high material costs, but also very low volumes. And the applications of low-cost space travel are plentiful. You know, we've all heard about Musk's ambition to send humans to Mars. They catch the headlines, but from communication networks to making semiconductors to doing very, very fast intercontinental travel, the application of spacecraft are manifold. So next slide, please. Just a final thought before you go enjoy your lunch. It's not one from me, it's from Microsoft founder Bill Gates. I know the future I've talked about here may seem a little outlandish, but it's driven by well-established predictable trends. It won't be here next year, but as an investor, you should be thinking about the next decade, and all of this and more will be possible on that timescale.